So, this started as a Muttday Morning news story back in episode 28, but Jules, wisely, convinced me to spin it off as its own video essay. So then I had to, get it written and published before I made the executive decision to not allow myself to play Pokopia until I've actually done that, as I'm afraid from the reactions of my contemporaries, it will inspire me to basically do exactly this video again. Plus, I felt obliged to follow through on this joke from Muttday 28.
I want to do more silly outfits too, but trying to read my script in the cow onesie, I was melting. And the Umbreon half hoodie thing, well, okay, that was mostly just that I had some near misses of, let's say, slippage. But since I'm not recording these live on Twitch anymore, that probably isn't as much of an issue, is it? Oh, this is how YouTubers end up with prop closets. I get it now.
Fair warning, this hood is definitely not staying up all thing because it's warm. It's been an odd few months for Pokemon. There's a new game managing to look like a store's own brand toy to hook in well-meaning grandmothers of both Pokemon fans and Palworld fans. The GameCube's less well-known Ore-Region game came out on Nintendo Online. You have the expansion pass. Fire Red and Leaf Green were released on the Switch as distinct purchases. Champions, well, at time of writing, sounded fine if kind of questionable on paper, but there's a reason I had to add a whole second half to this video, so... Oh, and Gen 10, Wind and Waves, were announced for the Switch 2 in a trailer showing the new starters, which have left many trainers actually quite hopeful. Maybe this will be the good one! Well, a good one? But let's not forget about Pokopia, a game I swear, and hopefully right now you're seeing if I have the evidence to back that up, every Pokemon fan and journalist reacted to, at least at its initial announcement, with, "What? Who is this for?" When it was first shown off. I also very distinctly remember when Palworld immediately copied it. I will address it in a minute. But now, Pokopia has managed to sell out of pseudo-physical game key cards, at least, again, at time of recording. Okay, look, I keep bringing it up, but I don't really care about Palworld. The designs are derivative, the pitch package Pokemon with guns and crafting and an open world and base building opens the way, well, Pokemon fanboys who don't know any better tend to describe Digimon before sounding more like a kitchen sink approach to game design than anything else, but I don't hate it or even really care that it exists, quite frankly, much less that people enjoy it. What I don't understand is, well, one, how there are Palworld fans when I don't know what their identity is beyond just liking the thing that isn't Pokemon. But two, why every discussion they have around this game and IP they supposedly like is completely dominated by, "Ooh, bet Pokemon will sue us for this one too!" Like, Palworld is doing a card game, which they were showing off at C2E2, and while the cards are, I'll be kind and say, busy, the art, notably uncredited, is fine. The mechanics look fine. And yet, the discussion when I stumbled headfirst horribly into their Facebook groups, I don't know how, was still irony poisoned. "Ooh, bet Pokemon will sue us for doing a card game too," not like they were the second ones to do it after Wizards, but whatever. Look, one, y'all are fans, not employees. Like, you don't have any sort of ownership over this. I mean, I guess unless they are paid employees, but... Let go of the irony and just enjoy the thing if you actually do. That's fine, you can just do it. Okay, back to Pokemon. See, myself and Jules have been playing through Fire Red and Leaf Green, respectively, for the first time to, well, fend off the horrors. I started playing Silver and only played Ruby of the Gen 3 games. What do you want from me? I was 10. I'm calling out Jules specifically as the fox, in addition to keeping me from going nutty with Muttday episode 28, helped kind of crystallize these ideas into well, this video essay, at least the first half of it. So hey, let's have this discussion. What the fluffing hells is up with modern Pokemon, and how did we get here? We're not having the discussion about why I'm doing it in the Eevee Kigurumi. I feel like that's self-explanatory. First, we must obviously confront the reality that I, and quite frankly most of you, are probably not 10 anymore. But when I was 10, and I assume frankly a lot of us when we were 10, connected with games on a very different wavelength than we do now. I wish I could recall who I saw saying this, but whoever it was put it rather well, and I'm now going to horribly paraphrase I think it was a Skeet. Yeah, it was probably on Blue Sky. When I was a kid, I played games for the experience and to immerse my, at the time, wildly active imagination into that space. That's not how I enjoy games as an adult, though there's a bit more to it now. I'm a creative. I can't really turn off that part of myself without drugs or significant head trauma, but I'm also an adult who's made one or two small games before, who writes fiction and poetry, whose bread and butter is discussing media and news, discussing the way we tell stories. In no small part, a lot of the enjoyment I derive from games now is in figuring out how systems work, why they work the way they do, how the game's narrative flows and interacts with its mechanics, assuming it's trying to do something like that, which a good game should be. However, that's also why I brought up Jules' reaction to Leaf Green compared to Sword. Because Paw didn't grow up with Pokemon. While nostalgia and our childhood experiences certainly play a part, there has been a marked shift in the quality and perception of mainline Pokemon games. Second off, we have to confront the fact that the information environments of Red and Blue's release in 1996, Fire Red and Leaf Green's in 2004, and that which Wind and Waves will face in 2027, are so wildly different that they are functionally alternate universes. If you were a really committed fan in 1997, you might have been the super online goblin every Pokemon friend group seemingly required or manifested at least one of, who shared the myths and legends of Pika-Blue, the Mew Truck, or the true intent behind Missing No. In 2004, even odds you could find Nintendo Power with gameplay guides for Pokemon Coliseum, Fire Red, and Emerald in magazine stands. In a year people actually bought those, or maybe even at your local library. Here in 2026, hackers have stolen massive troves of developer data on no less than 3 occasions. The fact that Nintendo is doing a Disney emulation as close as Japanese law will allow is an observable fact. And what Nintendo did to Gary Bowser is so open a secret, Nintendo brags about it. Unless you intentionally choose to avoid all information, it's difficult not to catch a glimpse of the inhumanity at the core of every multinational conglomerate wearing the overstretched skin of our nostalgia. When Fire Red came out, Prima had a contract with Nintendo to make a professional guide, ownership of which declared you the hegemonic sovereign of the playground, or maybe you were online enough to keep hoping for all time that this GameFAQs guide would eventually update, or that a new one would get posted and actually get updated. Today, you may very well be watching someone speedrun Fire Red while ranting about the cut content from Sinnoh myths from the Terra leak while watching this video. Or maybe I'm the weirdo for needing both a background noise video and a video that I'm specifically focusing on. Or it might just be the ADHD. But since we can't really do anything about the stark difference in the informational environments of 1996 and 2026/27, actually, if something significant happens to change that by 2027, that would also be bad and horrible in a whole bunch of different ways. I hadn't thought about that one. I figure acknowledge it, except that this is essentially the same issue Dan Olsen, I swear I watch other video essays too, but he's been key to my topics lately, okay? Was addressing in his second video on WoW Classic. And since it's not one of my core points, and I don't want to make my own hour-and-a-half-long video discussing just that topic when Dan Olsen already made it, and this is already probably going to be more than an hour long, go watch that so I can get to my own ideas, okay? Cool. Thanks. It's a really good video, too. Even if you don't play WoW, I seriously do recommend it. It has a lot of, I don't know, core ethos about a lot of game design and the ways that especially the information access that we have has fundamentally changed the way that we as players interact with games, especially if there's any kind of competitive or multiplayer component. Yes, this will also come back when I have to focus on a completely different system that Pokemon kind of tries to not think too much about. As for those actually addressable issues with modern mainline Pokemon, I'll place the blame firmly in two camps. First, a loss of style over the generations. Second, a development environment favoring box blurb new features over mechanical and narrative depth. I want to make it clear. Modern Pokemon's iconography and visual language? Great! On point! A lot of its sound design too, albeit many of those have changed very little since 1996, though even my own immediate opinion on, say, Champions battle music is a banger. Like, it's just good. They still do a lot of good things. However, since the 3DS dragged Pokemon into its shuddering low FPS polygonal swarms, the mainline games have given up stylism in favor of each game's utterly unique and likely never to return features. The swarms and megas, totems, ultra beasts, and Z moves, the open-ish world and inversely dubbed, to my chagrin if no one else's, Gigantamaxing and Dynamaxing. Dyna means change. It should be the one that physically changes you, not the one that just makes you bigger. Now when I say style, I'll bet most of you think I'm trying to say sprites without saying the Gen 1er whiner staple, I miss sprites. You're not entirely wrong, but you're not entirely correct either. I think sprites carried more visual stylism because the Pokemon had to be conveyed in a single image, maybe with a few wiggles without reusing existing art. That was a whole element of the two versions thing, seeing how the same Pokemon was portrayed a little differently while still reading as the same creature after you traded them with your friend. But it doesn't have to be sprites. Heck, it doesn't even have to be 2D. Though I do argue 2D inherently helps force developers into a more stylized direction instead of the photorealistic obsession 3D seems to preternaturally inspire in devs, or at least in their executives. Actually, second deeper cut in here? Sure, whatever. If you want to learn more about video game animation, get a taste for how stylism can be used in 3D, and get ahead of this video's super secret second half, go check out New Frame Plus. It's a YouTube channel focusing on educating layfolk on the fundamentals of animation and how they apply, sometimes a little differently than other industries, to video games. Plus, Dan Floyd, the dude who runs it, is a treasure of a human being, funny as hell, and he even has a whole video specifically on the battle animations of every mainline Pokemon game before the release of Sword and Shield, which I'll be referencing in the second half of this video. Oh, and in case the name sounds familiar, yes, he is also the dude who started Extra Credits as a, solo thing for, an initial college project, which then became a whole thing which he got out of as James, I don't remember his last name or the allegations about him and what he's done with Extra Credits and Extra History since. I'll throw up a visual here because I would rather try not to remember if I can help it. Just look at the beautiful stylized art of different artistic mediums all across the Pokemon TCG. Or look at Pokemon Concierge. Not me. Look at Pocopia's console driving sales. Stylism is endearing. It ages like a fine wine, but it requires that one care in the creation and maintain the style consistently, or do something like the TCG, where they can be inherently, intentionally dissociated, and you can make the audience specifically seek out the, oh, that's the artist who does those cool 3D models, or the one that does, papercraft things, or the one that does whatever. Modern mainline Pokemon isn't easy to develop. No AAA game development is easy, but it often reads as lazy to players because we all know, or at least grok to one extent or another, once you've made the base model and rigged it with animations, assuming you're not changing those animations or that model on a terribly regular basis, you've pretty much done most of the work. Sure, you can break other animations to the model, you can add new custom animations for a specific move. Those take a little bit more work, but it's not something that means you have to get rid of that existing animation library. I need to stress, this is the good part of sequels. It allows devs to put more time into what makes the sequel unique from its predecessor. Ubisoft was actually really good at this for a while with the likes of Far Cry Blood Dragon, using existing models, animations, and assets with minor tweaks and visual filters to make a budget side pull. For a less good example, you could also look at Gat Out of Hell. Sure, Pokemon might get a new animation set, or animations for a unique move, or a new texture, or even just a new shading style, but we sort of get that Charmander will probably look about the same in Wind and Waves as the Salamander did in X and Y. For barking out loud, even Pokemon has done great stylized 3D games, and I just specifically said games there because I already mentioned Pokemon Concierge. I'm not going to dive into any of the odder games like Snap, and I've already said I need to have this done before I let myself try Pokopia, which also means needing to afford Pokopia, but that's a second issue on its own. But look at Pokemon Stadium and the Pokemon Coliseum games. Stadium, unlike every Switch game, had voice acting!
Here's the first move. The attack wasn't effective.
A commentator who made the polygonal N64 battles feel more like a proper sporting event than every text wall gym in Sword and Shield, set on a magic kaiju pit put together. Taking the hood down, it's too warm. It's too warm. No, Coliseum didn't have a dedicated narrator, and was certainly worse for it. But it still got away with its style by committing to its subversion of the expectations the franchise spent the prior decade establishing. Pokemon is about a generally utopian world with fairly ineffectual villains, outside of a couple of minor instances, who cause the occasional apocalypse, usually, but not always, by accident. On the other hand, the Ore region sucks. It's mostly a desert. The main character is not a self-insert that you get to create and craft, but a thief and a former member of an actually kind of legitimately evil organization. Sure, there's still cartoonish Saturday's morning cartoon bad guys, but by comparison to Team Rocket, they are a much more significant force. I would argue that they also have their shit slightly better together than even Team Plasma. You can only catch new Pokemon by stealing them from their abusers, almost exclusively in double battles, in a better commitment to the mechanic than any mainline game before or since, all while using this bike to get around the region hunting your personal goal rather than to get the 8 badges and fight the Elite Four. Coliseum, not Pal World, is Pokemon for Digimon fans, and I mean that as a compliment. A very high compliment. That doesn't necessarily say good things about Digimon games. Look, Digimon games are pretty consistently hit or miss, but also, that's because they generally try more interesting things. Basically every Digimon game reads like a spin-off Pokemon game, so their quality can be mixed, but yeah. But even before that, look at the camera in Pokemon Coliseum and compare it to the one in Violet. Sure, the models are higher detail, some of these are still the N64 models, for goodness sake, but by sending you to a fixed battle area, the camera can use planned angles to make sure things look good. The devs can make sure you're seeing the attacks, the hits, and the whiffs from ideal angles. Also, better to highlight when, say, a Pokemon has a custom attack move. They even kept this up going forward to Sword and Shield. It just went away with Scarlet and Violet because of the open world and needing to be able to control your camera. Yes, it is technically impressive that battles can happen in the same map that you explore in Scarlet and Violet. It's technically impressive the player can completely control and futz with the camera. But what does it add? In the Legends games, it allows us to dodge stray attacks, or directed attacks, but not in the mainline games. There, your paws are nailed to the floor, and reality, besides your battle, fades out of existence. But they made an open world, so we just have to be able to see it at all times, I guess? Plus, that way you can swing your camera around wildly, and you can see your trainer there, which is great, but There are so many other cuts that were made to enable you to have control over the camera, which doesn't benefit you in any way, or benefit the story that they're trying to tell. It's just, oh, you can control the camera! For the record, I'd also count the writing of modern Pokemon in the same lack of stylism boat. Pokemon writing has never been amazing, but if you look at Fire Red, you'll notice every text box is one sentence.
It'll annoy me if I don't correct this in the edit. They're not always one sentence, they're always one idea intended for you to take in their whole thing, whatever they are, all in one go.
But I trip over reading out Switch Pokemon dialogue constantly. The sentences overrun the text boxes all the damn time. It's a horrible combination of verbose and oddly phrased, since no one has been paid to say any of these lines out loud and go, this is not how an English speaker would say this. Or if you're looking at some of my filming from Champions, realizing that, oh my goodness, you just needed to hire an editor. Maybe a dozen of them with hedge trimmers. As for the scope creep point, let's compare Pokemon Silver to Scarlet and Violet. Red and Blue were fundamental, but a bunch of mechanics were straight up broken, and I'm being kind by not using Crystal for my comparison, okay? In Silver, on the Game Boy Color in 1999/2000, depending on country you live in, we had 2 regions, 251 Pokemon, fishing, breeding, trading, PvP battling, version exclusive, 16 gyms, the Elite Four, the previous champion Red, a mostly complete story until it trails off in the second region a bit, and a story beat introducing shiny Pokemon intentionally. In Violet, on the Switch, we have 1 open world region plus 2 DLCs, best described as the hilly area around a rice paddy village and a circle cut into 4 pieces with a biome in each. 843 Pokemon, give or take how you count things like unique forms that may or may not return, and also regional variants. Look, there's a legitimate debate about whether regional variants are their own Pokemon or not. Leave me alone. Fishing.
Yeah, I had to cut that. I just remembered they removed fishing from Scarlet Violet. Oops.
Breeding, trading, PvP, version exclusives, multiplayer raids with, I'm going to charitably call it interesting netcode, though that maybe that's just my weird internet hating my Switch. 8 gyms, and 2 mechanics I distinctly remember working like gyms, but more boring and aggravating to interact with, and which I'm trying to Team Star. Those were kind of interesting, if... Okay, not really. It was mostly just send your Pokemon out and then eventually get into the one big cool fight. And the other... the Titan Pokemon, which would have felt like boss fights if there was any sort of direction so that I fought them at the correct levels instead of once I'd done basically everything else and realized, oh, that's why I don't have a bunch of my movement abilities. Oops. There's also an Elite Four you can't refight for some reason. A second team of school children Elite Four who are harder than the first, and who I guess you technically can refight, but only individually, and I think one of them's actually excluded, and only with the weird DLC-only system of... See what I'm saying about scope creep? But we've also still got terrastalizing and picnics, which also now have the Pokemon breeding tied into them, and weirdly limited character customization after multiple games of it being a focal feature. And this legendary Pokemon who's also not really in your party, but is always around because he's your bike and your surf and your glide, but not your fast travel because that's a different thing. Oh, and you can also make sandwiches, which have a series of different, wildly complex buffs that you will totally learn the ins and outs of by trial and error. Except that there are literally millions of combinations, and that's just completely unreasonable, so no, all of us definitely just go check a fan-made calculator for the actual effects that we want, given that most of the effects that we want are either just rapid experience gain or the shiny buffs, especially when one of the key ingredients requires grinding those multiplayer raid battles with dubious netcode, and of course, finally, the in-game ranked multiplayer. So here's the point where I reveal that the second camp has a super secret, not quite fully developed third camp growing out of it like a cancerous bit of keratin. Competitive Pokemon battling. Nearly every mechanic introduced in Pokemon since the 3DS has made the competitive scene more approachable, easing the hard lurch so many players experienced when they first learned about systems like effort values, individual values. I had to remember what IVs actually stands for because I foolishly wrote it as just IVs in my script. And natures, after a buddy with a competitive team utterly slaughtered them in a couple of seconds. We used to pretty openly discuss the mixed blessing that was a thriving competitive scene in MTG way back when I was a Magic podcaster. Yikes, nigh on 17 years ago. But ranked multiplayer feeding into competitions with actual cash prizes have just sort of become the norm over the last decade and change. As such, I don't see folks talking about this much anymore, so I guess let me? Competitive scenes in games serve two purposes to game publishers, and neither is what anyone would call an unalloyed good. That's not to say competitive scenes are inherently bad for their players, or even the players around the competitive scenes that have no immediate impact on it, but if a company is pushing a competitive scene, they have specific goals in mind. Generally, those fall into a couple of camps. One, to keep competitors buying in. It's more obvious with TCGs when new ever so slightly better cards are released to change up the meta, or cards are banned so that others need to fill that space, essentially. Or if you play a rotating format, like Standard, or I think it's also called Standard in the Pokemon TCG, or they also have, I think they also have Extended too, don't they? That will force cards out of the current environment and force you to purchase new ones. But the Pokemon DLCs, more than doubling the number of Pokemon in Violet, rather obviously limits grinders who didn't want to drop a further $35 on top of the $60 they already paid to play. You have to engage with the live service elements of Pokemon in a way that is rather blatantly buying power if you are trying to be a VGC competitor in any way. The second is the one that we used to talk a lot more about in the Magic scene, which is its marketing. In more traditional sports where no one owns the sport, like football or soccer, the teams, the stadiums, even the individual athletes advertise products, effectively as a way of offsetting the costs of, well, everything that a consumer would theoretically pay by getting tickets, or, like, the fees that they're paying to a cable company to have access to the channel where the team is broadcast, that sort of thing. They take on advertisement to offset all of that, so your individual ticket used to not cost ridiculous amounts of money. Now it just still costs ridiculous amounts of money, and you're advertised to constantly, but that's more an issue with modern athleticism. But with esports and whatever you'd call competitive card games, that is technically an option, but the owner is also marketing the game they own to new potential players. Not only are they marketing the game, they're also marketing the fact that you could compete and get involved in this scene. That's why so many games have ranked multiplayer now. You, viewer, might not be willing to destroy your body from a young age the way getting really good at football or basketball would require, but you could probably learn to play a card game, or League of Legends, or Valorant, or especially something, I'm not going to say slow, but more turn-based and thinky, like, say, competitive Pokemon battling. Yeah, sure, you may never go pro, and talking to a lot of esports will make it clear it's not really a glamorous life. If the prizes are good enough to live off of, the practice is long, hard, and constant. If they're not, then similar problem, but also while holding down another job or turning your practice times into streams and videos to make ends meet. This is actually a big thing in the Magic circle at the time, where a lot of the best Magic players were poker players who did Magic for fun, because they made their money, if they were making their money competing, by competing at poker, where the prizes were bigger and frankly just a lot more consistent, and then Magic was their time off to have fun, which they were still actively grinding in teams for at the time. The Magic scene that there's a reason why I focused on flavor and not actual competitive at the time, but it was a wild place back in like the early 2010s, 20-teens. And I guess I did that in like the late aughts too a little bit, so... Magic was in a weird spot. Magic's always been in a weird spot. It's in a real weird spot now too, but it was... We talked about things a little bit more frankly back then, if I'm completely honest. And that's sort of the issue with modern Pokemon. The competitive scene has the development focus, both easing entry into it and because a lot of the maintenance comes down to balancing what attacks, abilities, Pokemon, and even items are available in a given season. That's complex, but it's mostly math, which doesn't require rendering, processing, animators, modelers, or even really programmers. To return to that comparison to WoW and Dan Olsen's video, Why It's Rude to Suck at World of Warcraft, modern Pokemon is built to let you optimize whatever your playstyle is, assuming that it can also help push PvP. Sandwiches, and before them, curry, facilitated shiny hunting and experience grinding. Sure, those aren't just for PvP, but find me a competitive player who doesn't bling out her team or her favorite deck. Natures persist not because the characterization of your Squoval being serious is fun and subversive, but because they can be used to give mints more power to adjust your pet's personality, not because you want to adjust their personality, but because you want to optimize their stat values. It's as smooth a path from the story into PvP as they can manage, and that means the story, the main game, exists, but mostly to facilitate getting you into that. I'm not sure if it's me trying to draw meaning from my struggles, trying to catch a Kangaskhan in Fire Red Safari Zone for more hours than I actually care to admit, but Violet feels like the opposite of, well, what Yahtzee said about Minecraft, again, longer ago than I care to admit.
Part of the appeal of building is the effort required to gather materials. That 80-foot golden cock and balls wouldn't be so satisfyingly turgid if it weren't for the entire continent you had to turn upside down to find all the ore.
But it wasn't Pokemon ZA selling out of physical copies. No, it was Pokopia, the silly fun side project about doing something odd as a mutagenic slime monster. Pokemon battling is the gameplay of Pokemon. It's arguably the best, or at least most solid part of Pokemon Violet. It's also not why I, personally, fell in love with Pokemon. Sure, battling is fun, but I saw a small fox that could evolve into many forms and who was loved as they were now, and for whom they might one day choose to become. Sure, Charmeleon looked cool, but the appeal was never, he's the strongest, it was, he's a pet who I get to spend time with. Yeah, it was pretend, but so are the visuals I imagine when I read a book. What I'm trying to say is, while desperately trying to keep this in a reasonable word count, I wrote that before I knew there was a second half, is if you've been feeling disappointed with modern Pokemon, frankly, go try Fire Red or Leaf Green. Play it for fun, whatever that means for you. For me, it meant spending a whole night wiggling in a single spot so as to avoid burning my very limited, well, Safari Zone steps and my repels, so that I could maybe, hopefully, this time catch a fucking Kangaskhan, and it wouldn't just immediately run away. Like, I should be playing a thing over here of, like, all of my attempts, but that wasn't even all of my attempts. Just the ones after I remembered I could record video on the Switch's screenshot button retroactively. Also, why I missed recording the moment I found a shiny Nidoran on the same hunt, and am totally using this as validation after being reminded everyone's moveset's kinda honkin' Gen 3, and the pre-physical special split times were not kind to punchy normal types whose whole selling point is being able to use many different types of moves. like Fire, Thunder, and Ice Punch, all of which are special attacks for reasons, like Kangaskhan, but I still caught one and named her Mama. Just as an aside, I named the shiny Nidoran Babs. I'd been using a Nidoran named Bugs. Well, I technically had been using a Nidoqueen by that point named Bugs, and it seemed funny given the rest of my team are just fun lesbian-adjacent reference names. So, a shiny blue extra boyish Nidoking I'm headcanoning as a repressed trans girl, calling herself the porn slur for trans women, a femboy, while the rest of the lesbians of the party try and pull a very Durav, if you get my drift. It's the fun kind of appealing dumb crap that you can do in Pokemon when you don't care about, but it has to be the best, most optimal team because you're having fun with the game and experience. And that's where the super duper extra secret fourth point I'm sneaking in, which itself is actually... Look, this is a more fully developed third point, but Shush. 3D open worlds where we can look at our customized character trying to believably pet our lovable monsters. Trouble is, we can see it. And while it's often fine, it's not what we could imagine. It's kind of the worst option. The animations are fine TM. Not good, not bad, just fine. To see once and skip from then on. Where stuff like the fade on Pokemon Messieurs leaves the player room to imagine how one even massages any given Pokemon. Or even the 3DS game systems with X and Y's Ami, where we can physically pet and feed them. And that means that each Pokemon had a little, walk up to you and eat the Poffin. They weren't Poffins. Were they Bonbons? Eating the things in X and Y and Pokemon Ami. They each got an individual one. It didn't just feel like they've applied the same little bounce animation that every Pokemon has in every Pokemon battle. Instead, it was a little bit more individualized, and they cheated by doing it from a first-person perspective and using the stylus to make it so that they didn't have to show your hands, letting you just kind of make that part up for yourself. Modern Pokemon doesn't give us those moments to imagine something silly or spectacular. They show, not tell. They just aren't showing us anything that amazing because a lot of the time, any given Pokemon's animation is going to be pretty similar to another Pokemon's animation. Here's hoping Wind and Waves will be a different story, but hey, at least those pre-rendered water effects look really good, I guess? At least that was where I was going to end this video. Then Pokemon Champions released on the Switch alone on April 8th, and just kind of proved that whole bit about ranked battles' mildly carcinogenic nature right in one fell swoop by exemplifying almost all of my points. On its face, I don't even think that's a bad thing. Sectioning off the live service forever play grind, I mean, again, to reference that Dan Olsen video, it's technically more of, it's instrumental play, but it's forever instrumental play through a live service. If you siloed that off on its own, just make ranked Pokemon its own siloed app, that could and should free up development space and time for mainline games to be more of their own things. But Pokemon Champions isn't trying to be just the VGC's new system, format, facilitator. It opens with a narrative and tries to set up characters and something approaching motivations. The trouble is, it's also trying to be a ranked competitive game with a grindy mobile gacha game. All of those things can blend together. I mean, Hoyoverse has kind of proven that you can do exactly that if that's what you want to do, although they don't to my knowledge, have any sort of, like, major ranked multiplayer. I'm not saying they should, merely they can be combined together. Champions is probably one of the worst examples of that blending I've ever seen. Like, I was trying to come up with something comparably inept from such a major brand, and I honestly could not think of anything. Like, the best that I came up with was, like, okay, comparing it to Magic Arena or maybe Pokemon Unite and sort of Pokemon Quest, because they both did similar things, but they got worse after actually, I don't know about Pokemon Quest getting worse after release. Pokemon Unite got worse after release. Pokemon Quest just kind of started, why would you pay for this? And I don't know if they ever improved that. Oh, or that MTG Diablo-alike that I'm fairly certain was shut down before the end of its first beta test on the Epic Store. Champions has the same hallmarks, a tissue-thin veneer of narrative looking to explain why you're simultaneously the stalwart hero of the land, or in this case, a prodigal Pokemon battler. Apparently they've decided trainer doesn't work anymore since you're not training them, I guess? Here to take over a gym from some dude, despite having 0 Pokemon of your own, and despite him saying that you are a magnificent, skilled battler who he called out here specifically to do this, and then still has to test your battle abilities. Look, the narrative's bad, okay? The game also has half a dozen currencies, most of them easily confusable because they're tickets. They're just different kinds of tickets. Sorry, one is a coupon. That makes a very big difference, thanks. One is the predominant currency, VP, I assume victory points, but I'm honestly not sure if it ever told me. Usable for nearly everything, and thus to be ideally used only for the things which only they can buy, such as held items, megastones, and basically every cosmetic. We'll get to my gripes with those in a minute, don't worry. Other tickets can be used to make training free, to speed up your next pull on the recruitment slot machine. The game makes a very big deal of calling free, despite only the pull itself being free. You still need to pay VP or a recruitment ticket to claim a Pokemon for more than a week, and if you claim a Pokemon with the free temporary week thing, you can't train it and make it actually good for your team until you've paid the VP to own it, and then you still have to pay VP to do the training, but I'm not even sure what these affinity tickets do, but since the whole idea here is that all the generational gimmicks will be usable to some extent in Champions, if I had to guess, maybe these will be used for changing Pokemon's Terra types, but that's mostly a baseless assumption and feels weird to have included already, if not the case. And that's before you poke at the Premium Battle Pass and the membership program. $10 for the Premium Battle Pass, lasting technically a bit more than a month, and $5 a month for the membership, which unlocks, a lot of convenience features like more teams, more music, and adding 1,000 new box slots to your base limit of 30. It's fascinating. Pokemon Works have managed to create what I'd call the most flagrantly predatory pay-to-win game I've seen in a very long time, and removed basically every incentive to actually take part in that system by giving them money. Yes, you could use the gacha recruitment system to build your team, checking over a list of Pokemon every 22 hours for one that maybe works for what you're trying to do, give or take burning a multitude of quick coupons to do it a little bit faster. Or you could connect to Pokemon Home, send over 25 Pokemon from ZA or Scarlet and Violet competitive teams you already built, and be done. Or you could send 25 untrained level 1 Pokemon from your home living decks, then use the training system to give them perfect effort values, stat alignments, moves, and abilities, and watch as the game treats them effectively as perfect IV Pokemon at the same level as every other Mon in Champions. Sure, you could pay for the Premium Battle Pass, get a bunch of extra VP, plus an Emboar for Alligator, their respective Megastones, and in this Mutt's humble opinion, the fuck-ass base ZA outfits, but you can just buy the Megastones for VP. You can pull Embor and Feraligatr from the gacha slot machine, or you can send them in from home. And not even pretend to worry about what you'll do with those Pokemon you technically spent a kind of currency on, who are now taking up some number of your limited 30 box slots, and who may very well not be usable in the next set rotation. See, that's the insidious part that I don't feel like folks are getting here. There's no good reason to play the slot machine when you can send in Pokemon from home. That's why the slot Pokemon have additional things like titles, and they can even spawn shiny, but you can't nickname them. Late edition, while poking around the menus, I actually found a nickname system. It's simply and inexplicably called their battle name, and you have to go hunt it up in the box menu's check summary option, which you're never directed towards since the training screen is where you actually adjust your Pokemon stats and moves. They can't be sent into home. They exist to battle in this regulation pool in Champions, and for you to wonder come next regulation if the sunk cost of holding on to that shiny Zorua is really worth it. Sure, this month you can't use her, but maybe next month you'll be able, and you'll regret returning her for no benefit, just so you could stay competitive. I also brought up that bit about stat alignments, and hot damn was that thing I said in the first half of this about nature's prescient. Champions is walking a delicate tightrope, one which Pokemon as a brand has been trying to distance themselves from since its inception. Remember that New Frame Plus video I mentioned earlier? Well, in it, Dan Floyd points out
to risk making the game start to look more like that fantasy dogfighting genre that the series is just trying so hard to pretend not to be.
Problem is, Champions is pretty firmly on the fantasy dogfighting side of the argument. Rather similarly to the way the UFC, since its launch, has shifted from what some have always argued was a facade of genuine interest and respect for the way martial arts can be blended together into what those same folks always argued lay beneath the facade, human cockfighting. Whether the facade was genuine or not, we can argue about until we're blue in the face, but it is human cockfighting now. Like, this is where folks like Andrew Tate get their start. Champions isn't a game about living with these creatures, it's a game where every creature you have access to has only one purpose: to be useful for your fantasy dogfighting team. They don't need names or natures or personalities, and yet Champions has a narrative, one which is entirely inaccessible once you're actually playing the game. To crib a bit from my own history as a former chef,
what you have here is a adult brownie sundae bar with the buttermilk ice cream, maple marshmallow fluff, topped with a bacon pretzel toffee brittle.
The danger with putting so many aspects on a plate is I have to pick it apart.
If you want to make a VGC app, just make a VGC app, and maybe release it on phones first so people like me aren't judging the cut corners on our damn big TVs. If you want to make a grindy, mobile, free-feeling gacha game, then make a grindy, mobile, free-feeling gacha game. If you want to make a Pokemon game with a narrative focus, make a nodding narrative-focused Pokemon game. But don't half-ass all three together into one half-baked thing. Yes, people will play it because it's Pokemon. But is that really what you want? People playing it just because it's Pokemon? So look, I've harped on about the narrative a lot, but let me really lay this out for you. When you load up Pokemon Champions, the first screen has two buttons, Start, and Buy the $7 starter pack, which doesn't even take you to the starter pack page, because what the fuck, Nintendo? It takes you to the free games page, where you then have to scroll down to find the starter pack. For those curious, that $7 starter pack includes 50 box slots. Again, the base for free players is 30, plus 50 tickets for free training, and 30 tickets for free permanent Pokemon recruitments, which are distinct from the coupons which actually let you make pulls on the gacha slot machine more than once every 22 hours, because of course we have to have so many currencies. Also, the default trainer battle music from Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu. So already asking for money before telling you what any of these things do, great start. Then you're thrown headfirst into character creation with the now classic, ooh, be careful, you can't change anything you're committed to, by which they actually mean your skin color and gender are locked, and everything else isn't, before an odd first-person cutscene, which leads directly into this dude saying, you're the magnificent trainer he found, told to come here, and is now going to challenge to a battle to hand over control of his gym, which is not the same as what Pokemon usually means by a gym, so he can retire. Naturally, that means, again, he's going to battle you with your no Pokemon, so he hands you his own, I guess, to determine if you're worthy. Again, despite the fact that he called you himself. And then we enter into the most mobile game tutorial possible. Every single step of which is a non-option, where the player is told to do something, has no choice, though does have the illusion of choice since they still have to press the confirm buttons, before having those actions explained to them again afterwards. They're mobile game tutorials. They're designed to inundate you with information and systems before you can get to grips with any single mechanic, so you keep following the glowy instructions before giving them your credit card info to make it just a little bit simpler. But they're doing this over the Pokemon battle system, which, while festooned with 30 years of move and design bloat, just is not that complicated. Which left me with plenty of time to point out the wild issues with the narrative we were forced to participate in. This whole thing is set in the Frontier, a town or some, I don't know, it just keeps getting called Frontier or the Frontier. I mean, it has a mayor who looks like this. No shade, I actually love this design, to be clear. Apparently the area is full of gyms, but not badge gyms that we would expect, or even seemingly really like a normal workout gym. If they're anything like ours, they're all huge buildings that don't exist because they're mostly this one menu here, run by single trainers, now called battlers and managers, inexplicably, despite ostensibly owning the gyms, a tired trans girl who watches battle videos all day at the otherwise needless reception desk, an old weirdo who used to own the gym but handed it off to the first person to walk in the front door so he could retire, by which he apparently meant continue running the training portion of the gym, and also saying that he's going to facilitate everything you need for the narrative, which also he hasn't been in any of the cutscenes that I've seen since that first one, I'm now realizing. Like, I've gotten one more after I got out of the Great Ball League, and he wasn't in it at all. He's just... Okay, but we're trying to enter the champion tier because... I don't know that either. I guess because it's there? No, I guess because the owner of the battle arena, which I guess is the place we all have our ranked battles at, like that stadium is, but I'm honestly guessing on that. No one ever said that out loud. This is the problem with giving me a narrative and then not knowing what the hell you're doing with it. Then there's this bit about how she's only owned it for 6 months. Okay, was it just built? Does ownership change hands? But also she hasn't taken the time to meet the gym managers, who apparently exist to do nothing but feed into the battle arena, except that she had already met the dude who ran this gym before, and just needed to meet us? What has she been doing for the last 6 months? Or does this story just make no fluffing sense, and no one involved actually cared because it's a tissue-thin veneer of a narrative to make you think that it's a real Pokemon game? I'm going with the latter because the second that cutscene is done, you finally get to see the home screen, which has absolutely no way to actually go back and see those cutscenes, including the one that I did admittedly skip over, which was the opening cutscene with no voice acting, though it did have very distinctly, clearly intended to be subtitles, not user-readable text. So a lot of them, they're bad. Which also managed to explain nothing, because there was no voice acting and you had to... Look, that whole opening cutscene is garbage to begin with, but it's also just reinforces that the point of this is to show you a bunch of flashy actions, not actually give you story or narrative, but to make you think that there's going to be one, and then let you forget about it since you can't rewatch it easily. I'll also say there was another cutscene after I broke into the Great Ball tier in single battles, though not when I did the same in doubles later. The cutscene was, however, once again, get to champion tier because reasons. Oh, also here have 5 more box slots. So yeah, that's why I have 35. And I have so many more knits that I could pick, but that would almost start getting mean. However, one can't actually be mean to a corporation which produces billions in revenue off the labor of thousands of employees while wielding near governmental power and authority, especially to destroy lives like those of, say, Gary Bowser. I think I will pick those knits. These weirdly low-res icons and artifacting everywhere. Yes, I know they've claimed they're going to fix it. They still released this. This was a game produced by a billion-dollar company with whatever the hell's going on here. The default characters, whose customizability is one of the primary incentives in the fluffing game, being the only starting profile icons, so there's no way you'll look like them after about 20 seconds. The utter dog shit that is the bug type selection, 9! There are only 9! And 2 of them are bug steel, and 2 others are bug poison! 2 Scyther evolutions, and 4 of the Pokemon in total are from Johto. They didn't even include my beautiful centipede knife wife, and she just got a Mega Evolution in ZA! The Pokemon options are weirdly limited all over the place outside the 2 big matchup triangles and normal types. Some Megas from the ZA DLC are here, though, again, not all of them, which feels odd, like Mega Lucario and Absol are here, but not their Mega Z variants. The Kalos starters Megas are here, but to get them, you have to send a Delphox, Chestnut, and Greninja from ZA, that you took from ZA, transferred to home, and then have them visit from home to Champions. Maybe it's just me, but it seems shit to include. It's not Palmy, it's Palmot. Yes, not Palmy. Palmot on this screen when every other Pokemon used in the menus is in the game and available. Actually, the same thing goes for this Rocky helmet on the shop menu screen. And these last few, which are really, really petty, before I get to some, let's call them backhanded compliments. Between rewatching Dan's battle animations video and the Boy Motor Owl's signature move being the face of the recruit button, I was sort of primed to be noticing when there also aren't custom move animations, like for Spirit Shackle, the one on that button, made for the fixed and controllable camera angles from Sun and Moon, and reused in both Ultra Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield, but dropped from Scarlet and Violet. He's just using the basic special attack animation, despite the camera control being back in the hands of the programmers. Yes, I'm pissed because they have that animation. The conceit of the Omniband even implies Z moves could and are intended to make a return. But no one cared enough to go get the unique animations they've already rigged for these models for their custom attacks. Pettiniggle II. This screen for the recruitment slot machine reads fine so long as there's time left. But once it's ready, there's just an inexplicable full bar offset from the text. While writing this section, I actually just discovered what the affinity tickets do, since when you get them from the use X type of move Y times achievements, they don't tell you. It's also how, until I noticed this button here, I had no idea how many of them I even had. You can use it to make sure your next pull has at least one type of a ticket you feed in. Again, Pokemon Home just invalidates this entirely. Finally, it starts to feel a bit malicious when the only screen where the default selection isn't yes, do this thing, whatever it is visitors from Pokemon Home, where the default option just so happens to be not let them in, but send them back. As for those backhanded compliments, well, it's really cool. They have a unique animation for using the Omniband and spinning it to show Mega Evolution is only one of many mechanics, although since it's the only one currently displayed on the Omniband, it looks a little silly. It sucks! That seems to only be for a single tutorial encounter explaining Mega Evolutions and never appears anywhere else. It's cool they made the ads in the stadium background cycle, though they've been doing that since Sword and Shield, and I know that they've got more ads made and they could have done more for this, so it's less impressive to only cycle between two sets of remarkably plain ads, especially when there were even better ones in the first gym that we were fighting the gym owner, I don't even care to remember his name, in to start with. Although to front hand after that backhand, whatever. The same banner shifting to match battle weather is actually a very good detail that I appreciate, and I think was also done in Sword and Shield. The champion battle music is actually pretty good, so it kind of sucks that the default music option is instead to grab a random trainer battle theme from nearly a dozen games instead of the one they actually made for this one. Tracking the balls on the player's belt hip things, that's great. Seriously, beautiful detail, but since we can't control what balls the Pokemon from the Gacha Balls are in, it once again encourages using your home Pokemon, and means I also have to point out that they didn't keep track of the Pokeballs during the return animations.
Quick correction in editing, they did actually animate this properly, it's just that a lot of the Pokemon I happened to be using were on my character's left hip, which are inherently less visible from the animation perspective. Just mild niggle then that, hey, they put in a lot of work and they did it in a way that we can't easily see, but that's a different issue.
They had to make the game, which proved my point about how the competitive experience Game Freak has curated is so dissociated from the meat of what mainline Pokemon games used to be, and well, they did it! Ivies and Eevees aren't little stat changes or quirks that make your Fennekin unique from the one your sister caught. They're optimizations you must pursue to be competitive. But evolve them both, throw those Delphoxes into Champions, and they might as well be the exact same fops, smoothed over to the exact thing you need for your competitive fantasy dogfighting team today. Hell, just look again at the attack descriptions. Pure mechanics, no fluff, no explanation of what is actually happening, and it's not even a good explanation of the mechanics. You don't get information about what contact means. You don't get explanations about how Mold Breaker works. Any of these. You will get little bits, but it's stuff about like, oh, this inflicts a status condition. Here's what that status condition does. Not what this thing having contact or priority +3 versus +5 means, or any of that. If you want to build the ranked competitive fantasy dogfight simulator because you've developed a community of hyper-competitive players and a whole ecosystem around them, as well as are using them for marketing the rest of everything you do, fine! Just do that! If you didn't try to spread the already gossamer thin Pokemon world building onto this thing to imply a narrative and stakes, I wouldn't have to harp on it. If you wanted to make a Pokemon Showdown, you can just make a Pokemon Showdown. Just, better. Because you're a subsidiary of Nintendo and Game Freak. You can just do that and not pretend that there's anything more to it. You could have chosen not to try and monetize the bare bones experience sold as the way to use generations of Pokemon already stored in another already paid service. But you, Pokemon Works, Game Freak, Nintendo, the Pokemon Company, decided to throw half-baked world-building, simultaneously trite, inexplicable, and utterly vaporous narrative, predatory monetization, and your wannabe dedicated VGC game into a wood chipper and serve up the congealed remains, asking for $15 a month for it. Honestly, I'll probably keep poking Champions every once in a while just to see if they address any issues, or go the Pokemon Unite route and just double down on the predation. It's not exactly making me hopeful for Wind and Waves, but Pokemon Works are a separate team from Game Freak, but then again, so are Omega Force, the Koei Tecmo division who developed Pokopia! There's always the hope, however faint, that between the pushback Champions launches scene and its own seeming intention to be the home for VGC going forward, Wind and Waves will get to be more of their own thing, that they'll be allowed to focus on their region, their own story, and simply use home and Champions for the competitive side instead of trying to build it into the game. I sort of doubt it will be anything that significant, seeing as, again, it's a really good way of making your competitive players pay for the $30 inevitable DLC, but Mutt can dream, right? I really should come up with better transitions to my outros, shouldn't I? Oh. Kid is great. Kid is great. Kid is great. That is your one unquestionably good choice. Sucks she's basically just here to shill the gacha mechanics. That was, a bit of a cynical end. I do honestly hope Nintendo will learn from their recent missteps and the impressive sales of their spin-offs over the decades, not even just Pokopia. Worst case, well, we have 30 years of games and spin-offs to play, and that's even before you start digging into, well, the likes of fan games, or the whole creature-collecting genre Pokemon has effectively spawned. You don't even have to go look at bigger mainline things like Digimon or Monster Rancher. If you want some suggestions, I mean, for bigger ones, you could always look at Monster Hunter Stories. That just had a third game came out, if I remember correctly. There's also Cassette Beasts for a cute 2.5D hybrid thing. And you can also look at Monster Sanctuary for something utterly unique. 3v3 turn-based battles with a Metroidvania map exploration. Plus it's on sale for was on sale for $5, but it goes on sale pretty regularly. The same developer also has another creature collector. This one is like a run-based roguelike in early access called Aethermancer. Haven't had a chance to try that one myself, but if it's anything like Monster Sanctuary, it's gonna be real good. Hey y'all, thanks for watching that whole thing. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and dingle the bingle so YouTube, actually tells you when I post new videos. If you don't know what I mean by that, I mean just press the bell, the bell down there, that thing, so it actually sends you notifications. As always, everything I do, written, streamed, videos, whatever, is all brought to you by, well, supporters like you! Here on YouTube, as well as over on Patreon, and Ko-fi. That's patreon.com/fen and ko-fi.com/fen for as little as $1 a month. You can also find my Discord and such down in the description. Have a happy time zone, and I think that's pretty much everything. So thank you very much to all of my patrons, but especially thank you very much to April, Fragile Paper, Manfred, Pinball Witch, Pimento, Robin Autumn Marsh, Rose, Writer Princess, and Yalk. I could not do this without all of your support, so thank you so very much.